Welcome back to First Step Fast and Furious this Friday morning. We're getting responses to the Prime Minister's apology to the nation last night and her decision to fire former Justice Minister Herbert Volney. We have been joined and said by attorney at law Martin George, whose colleagues, Martin George, let me stress that Martin.
One Martin too many.
George, whose colleague, Kristen Moore, has now been appointed the new Justice Minister. Yes, so I guess Tobago is smiling this morning.
Welcome.
Good morning, Minister Roberts, and good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. I must say, Paul, during the interview that you had, the telephone interview with David Abdullah, I think that's the longest period that anyone ever saw Minister Roberts quiet.
Yes.
So
I must say, I agree with you. It took great discipline to not respond to some of those.
You asked him to be quiet.
I want to go back to the issue, and yes, many would say the Prime Minister has acted, as Jesse said, strongly on this, after having gotten all the facts, as any leader should do in a situation as complex as this that involves the DPP and the Honourable Chief Justice, because those are separate entities that must be protected in the public's, the public's perception. But one of the points that Mr. Abdullah made is the fact that while this was going on, several other ministers were making pronouncements and they did not, like the Prime Minister, use wisdom in some people's estimation and wait to get all the facts. And also, serious questions had been asked. And people had a right to ask those questions.
Let me respond
and saying stuff like, let's move on.
Yes.
It's much to do about nothing. When we have all the facts now, it almost is like a slap in the face of the population.
Okay,
I think one thing, Minister Roberts, I think one thing that I think really exacerbated the situation was the statement, rather injudicious statement by Minister Volney when he said, this in 10 days this will be over. And I think that's clearly a misread of the population. And as I said last night, I certainly applaud the Prime Minister's statement, the way she delivered it. I know some people felt it was long, but as I said, when you sit in the office of Prime Minister, you must approach things differently. You must look at it in terms of your context in the place of history. If someone looks back afterwards at the speech, they must be able to see, well, okay, this was the setting, this was the preamble. So I think it was necessary to give the explanation, to set out, the things that occurred. That's right. I think that was really important. The only thing I think is that it should have been done sooner. This is my personal view. I mean, I understand what she says in that she felt the need to take the time and to speak with the other parties, but you are the Prime Minister. You are able to summon people at very short notice. The same way the Parliament was convened at very short notice. This is my honest view, that I think that, it was allowed to snowball too much for too long before a formal statement was made.
Based on what you're saying there, you're getting the sense then that it was the exercise of people power this week that brought this particular result.
I'm not sure. It may not have been. It may have been that, you see, sometimes you may see a house on fire and you may decide, well, look, maybe the fire will burn itself out and I may not even have to take any action. Or you realize that, look, hey, the fire is getting bigger and bigger, so therefore I am now forced to take action. I'm not sure which one it was, but the point is, if it is that you knew that, look, this was the circumstance and the cabinet note would have been in existence already. So in other words, you had the basis. And since in my column on Sunday in the Guardian, I wrote and I said, Volney must go. That was the thrust and gravamen of my column. I am not anywhere near Mr. Roberts or the members of cabinet, but the point is common sense must tell you on a reading of the facts that this is what has to be done. So that's my only concern with it, that it could have been quelled at a much earlier stage, because when you see you have civil society groups such as the Chamber, the TTMA, Fighton, all these others coming on board and expressing their voices, then it now makes it appear to be a much wider based resentment to the scenario than it might otherwise have been if you took earlier action. So that's my only concern.
Minister.
Let me just say categorically, and Jesse, me and for the whole population, if it was people power, that is brilliant. So nobody, if there is an opinion that the Prime Minister, listen to what we are discussing in a sort of a negative way, that the people spoke, the disparate groups spoke, the independent institutions spoke, and a Prime Minister listened. And somehow that has a negative connotation in this country. It shows over 50 years what has been the norm. No prime minister in the history of Trinidad and Tobago has listened to the people, has had the testicular fortitude to remove a sitting MP who received 10,350 votes and is a minister of justice and a former member of the bar. Let me tell you something. This is not an easy decision. The prime minister did not sleep. She does not feel well to bust throat. She's a mother and she thinks of her cabinet as her children. But when you do wrong, she will make sure that everything she investigates is proper and she will handle it. She's very strong. So while I would agree with in Mr. Martin George and other people's opinion, Minister Volney was wrong early. He's a member of the judiciary and understands the process and governance and so on. However, we must understand that a prime minister is removing a sitting MP. The Constitution protects me. The prime minister could remove me as minister of sport right now. But as a sitting MP who the people dip their finger for, it's a very serious constitutional position. And therefore, when in such a delicate matter, while she may have known what she may have had to do, she has to go through the necessary steps to ensure she consults with the DPP, gets the requisite notes of the July 24th meeting. Do you know that the person in this entire thing who I empathize the most with is the Honorable Attorney General? He has not won, David Abdullah trying to put the poor Attorney General in this, he has not one iota to do with it. He was not even in the country from July 20th to August 4th, when that fateful meeting of July 24th occurred. It was the Honorable Ganga Singh who was acting Attorney General. When he comes into a meeting on the 9th or the 7th to discuss a cabinet note, and the Honorable Prime Minister takes the lead, knowing full well the history of the Minister of Justice and the Chief Justice, which was brought to the fore in the public in 2010, and she asked that question of a minister, sir, has the Chief Justice been consulted? Is he okay with this? Has the DPP been consulted? And a minister sits in a cabinet and says, yes, they have. That has been settled. If you answered that to the head of the cabinet, no other cabinet minister, whether attorney general or whatever, that the MSJ gentleman who is now PNM, who has never sat in a cabinet and does not have an iota of experience to talk about it, could say anything other than
I want to go back to the issue of the fact that you're saying, yes, any leader should listen to the population, but some would look on and say that while this thing had been gaining some level of critical mass, that ended in some people's estimation with the protest, with how many ever thousands people estimated to be, there were some serious civil society groups and other prominent members of society that raised questions that were seemingly brushed aside.
No, I didn't make it clear. Let me clarify.
Can I just finish?
All right.
Please, Honorable Minister.
I know, but I didn't clarify.
Right, and when that happens, while the Prime Minister's approach to this is obviously, it turned out to be the right one and the one that attained wisdom, people looking on will say that, well, others in the cabinet did not follow suit, and serious questions were almost treated in a nonchalant manner, in a situation that has now proven to be a travesty.
That's right, yes. So in other words,
Yeah,
Paul,
no
if
problem with that.
they didn't have the full information, then they should not have been rushing forth to speak and to make pronouncements. You see, the thing is, in this country, it's very easy for people to rush forth, and we've developed a culture where the loudest voice appears to be the most knowledgeable. But when you sit and you analyze the facts, you analyze the scenario, that often isn't the case. And despite what Mr. Roberts has said, when you look at the situation involving Minister Partap, who was also a sitting MP, because I'm using the very arguments that he has raised, he was also a sitting MP, he was also a minister, and yet decisive action was taken very swiftly. Now, granted, this scenario was a much more serious, much more important, and a much more egregious breach. Then, of course, you would require a bit more time, but I still think that too much time elapsed. In other words, when you think of the international repercussions of this lingering on unresolved, I think that while, yes, you took the correct action last night, I am saying that should have been done much sooner. The information could have been available. You could have summoned, called for a meeting with the Chief Justice the very next day, called for a meeting with the DPP the very next day, deal with it decisively and quickly. And I hope it was not a scenario of sitting and waiting and hoping, as Minister Volney said, that it would, go away as a 10-day wonder. That would have been a serious political misread.
I want to go back to something that Minister Roberts said with regard to the Attorney General, that Minister Ganga Singh was acting in that office when one of the fateful meetings took place. Does this mean then, either gentleman, does this mean that, he may be called to account for the role that he played while he was acting as Attorney General?
Well, that's what if my only point that I have to disagree with my colleague on is the time span in which the Honorable Prime Minister conducted a full-scale investigation, which required not only consultation with 11 different senior counsel, which required the detailed analysis of a cabinet note, which required the receiving, not only interviewing, but receiving minutes of a meeting on July 24th, in which the Chief Justice was there, the DPP, the Acting Attorney General, Minister Carolyn C. Prasad-Becha, and Minister Warner, and then she also conducted interviews with each and every one of these who had to be made to account for every moment, every statement that was made, and also what went on between the 24th and the 9th. It was an extensive investigation, and in our section of Trinidad and Tobago, when it takes 27 years to convict a man of stealing a transistor radio from Johnson & Johnson, I think the Prime Minister did fantastically well within a 2-week period to come and conclude a detailed investigation.
Is the acting Attorney General to be held accountable in any way at all, along with the Justice Minister?
No, because they were interviewed, they found out what went on, and they had no responsibility. When I, as a minister, I am the minister bringing a note, and I am asked a direct question by the head of the cabinet and the Prime Minister, was the Honorable, from the 24th, the Acting Attorney General would have known the Chief Justice had a problem with early proclamation, and the DPP had a problem on the 24th. On the 9th in cabinet, I think 7th or the 9th, the Honorable Justice Minister, when asked, is the Chief Justice okay with this? Is the DPP okay? Said yes. So therefore, that eliminates the...
I want to get back to that credibility issue now. We have political analyst Indira Rampasad on the line. Dr. Rampasad, good morning. Thank you for joining us on First Up.
Hi, good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Dr. Rampasad, your reaction to the Prime Minister's address to the nation last night, the axing of former Justice Minister Herbert Volney, and how this affects the entire perception from the population's perspective?
Paul, I think that it was actually a brilliant speech. I was calling on Wednesday on 91.1, that's CTV's radio station, that she should actually come out and make a speech. It was critical at that time for we to hear from her. And it was also important that it be a well-crafted, well-constructed speech that spoke to the truth with all the details and after thorough investigation had occurred. And I think she succeeded effectively in doing that last night. I'm listening to all their perspectives, and I've heard Minister Roberts there and Mr. Martin Daly on your channel this morning.
Martin George.
It's Martin George.
Martin George.